Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business book authors and leaders that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. This is our 118th show. Today's guest is Ben Bensaou, author of Built to Innovate. And as you can tell, Ben is a faculty member at INSEAD in France, which is a phenomenal business school. And we're so thrilled to have you today. So thanks for joining us.
Well, I suppose good morning for you. It's good afternoon for me in France here. And I'm very happy to be on the show. Thank you for inviting me, Marc.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure to have you. So let's first talk about your professional background. Give the audience a little bit about your professional background.
All right, so I'm formerly a professor of technology management at INSEAD. This is a business school with campuses in, the main campus is in Fontainebleau in France. We have another campus in Singapore, Abu Dhabi, and now we have a hub in San Francisco. So my specialty is really about innovation. Maybe to give a little bit of context to the work I do, I was trained as an engineer in France, but then I lived and was trained in Japan. So a lot of the inspiration in what I do research about comes from looking at Japanese companies. Yeah.
And why did you write this book, and what's different about this book than other innovation books? Because I liked how you adopted and embraced different methodologies or used different concepts of successful innovation. I've had quite a few authors talk about innovation. So what's different about this?
Yes, I mean, you can see actually the link with Japan and working with a lot of Japanese companies. But I've been kind of training and teaching about innovation for, I would say, about the last 20 years. And I've seen many established, even centuries-old companies able to innovate. And I had discovered that many people think that you need to be a genius leader or to be a startup to innovate. And working with these established organizations, working in industries that are not necessarily known for innovation, but they were able to innovate. And how did they do this? It was not by looking at some big bang or industry-changing effects. They were actually looking for small and important changes in very unexpected places. And what they used is what I refer to as continuous innovation. So if you will, the book is really about how do you embed in your organization, in particular, if you're a large established organization, how do you embed innovating capabilities using a systematic approach? So I've been working with companies and I've seen these leaders transform their traditional company into an innovation powerhouse. So I wanted to, let's say, document, describe and document and maybe also codify in a set of frameworks and tools and techniques how these leaders created these innovation powerhouses.
Yeah, and the book is so enjoyable because you've done such a great job of researching them, and I loved all the examples in here.
Thank you, Marc.
You start the introduction writing about the traits of organizations built to innovate. What are they?
Well, I would say that the most important thing is about giving permission to everyone to innovate. I mean, as I say, innovation is everybody's business, everyone's business in the organization. And these organizations were very innovative because they gave permission, they created an environment, a culture where everyone could innovate. Then they built this infrastructure, and I can talk about also how they built this organization, this formal, very concrete organization to connect the ideas, the innovators to resources. And I would say another trait of this organization is they are able, again, to question themselves. I refer to it as reframing themselves. They are able to challenge their current assumptions, their shared assumptions, and renew themselves in some ways.
You have a simple 7-step innovation process, and you teach your clients. Please tell me a little about that and how it can work for any size business, because we have a lot of small entrepreneurial companies that listen to this show. and I'm sure they'd like to adopt what you're doing. So can you talk about that?
Yes. So actually, at the outset, I would like to say that I'm not, how would I say, I'm not dogmatic about any particular innovation method. I think there are a lot of methods and tools and approaches to innovation out there. And I think what I try to do is to draw from all of those and synthesize it into what I call a 7-step innovation process methodology that can be used either in 2 ways. Either you can use it to develop a project. You want to innovate into a market, you innovate a product or process, you have a large project. And this is 7 steps that you can follow to actually conduct and conclude your project. But it's also 7 steps, you can think of them as a menu that you can use to train the innovating muscle of your team or your staff. So either you can use it just like in isolation as a way to train the muscle. Each tool is very simple, very intuitive, very visual, or you can use it as a package, if you will, as a process from A to Z to conduct an innovation project, initiative, if you will.
What kind of leader do you have to have at the top of the company? Because, you know, we've seen a lot of brands disappear. And throughout your book, you're not even giving just examples of technology companies. You're going across the board. And look, Kramer in the US was once a powerhouse retail company, and now they're essentially gone. And we've seen a lot of companies go. So what's the leader mindset, and what kind of culture do they have to build to make that happen?
So if you will, the book and experience that I had and what in a sense the book is trying to offer is a different narrative from what we've kind of have been used to in the, I would almost say, in the Anglo-Saxon kind of environment, is really that innovation is kind of seen, glamorized as you know, big bang, radical, disruptive innovation, or it is very often associated with a genius leader, somebody who has a special talent, if you will, and not that it is not correct, but it has become synonymous with innovation. We associate innovation with these kind of glamorous stories. But in fact, as I was saying, in my research, I've seen many companies where you wouldn't necessarily know the CEO, but they are extremely innovative, and they don't necessarily rely only on their top leaders, or they don't rely on their R&D capability, but they've been able to create that space, very protected, legitimized space where everyone can innovate. They can innovate in everything they do, not only in their products and processes, but also internal functions, internal processes, and where innovating has become a habit for everyone. So these are the leaders, if you will, who can create. First, I think the most important is to give permission to people to innovate. Then to create this infrastructure, if you will, where everybody is invited and encouraged to innovate. You have a governance structure that protects what I call the innovating engine, where people can actually start to innovate as a habit. So I think the leaders that I'm thinking about are people who put innovation at the center of corporate strategy, give permission, give a lot of attention to middle managers. We may talk about that later. Middle managers, I discovered, are vital to innovation, and they create this infrastructure where anybody can innovate.
Talk about the middle managers. I mean, I think that everybody basically looks at and cuts them out when they think of the process, because, you know, you have everybody looks at like brilliant minds like Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos and Henry Ford, and how they've, you know, inspired and encouraged people, not just in their own company, but across the board about doing it. But, you know, it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing that people need to execute it and encourage it at all levels. So where do the middle managers fit in?
Absolutely. I mean, again, there's a lot to learn from these genius leaders, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos of this world. But now not every company has Steve Jobs on their staff. So this is more about recognizing the lessons we learned from these people, but also understanding that everyone can innovate in an organization. And this is the role of the senior leaders to create that framework, that permission where people can innovate. But the people who are really critical are the middle managers. Again, senior leaders, they face a very uncertain, volatile environment. So innovation for them is essential. They understand this is essential to the survival of the company, and they are focused on it as individuals. Similarly, the people who are on the front line, on a daily basis, they meet with customers. They understand their pain points, their dislikes, their wishes. They understand also non-customers. For them, innovation is a no-brainer. So the people who are really squeezed in the middle with in some ways, not this direct pressure, external pressure for innovation, are the middle managers. And on top of it, these are people who are made responsible for execution. So they're not trained in innovation. They don't see the urgency of innovation. They don't have incentives for innovation. But I realize that they are central. Without them, innovation doesn't happen. So I've seen many of the companies that I talk about in the book. I mean, I can talk about Bayer, BASF, Samsung, Fiskars, Courtside, lots of companies that, again, are operating in industries that are not necessarily known for disruptive innovations, but these organizations have been able to create hundreds of new ideas coming from the front line, because their middle managers have a support structure, if you will. So first, they like, let me take the example, for instance, of let's say Allianz, the German insurance company. They created an initiative called I2S, Ideas to Success, where they would have 72 middle managers who are totally trained in innovation and are, distributed in 37 countries. And they took on the job of helping and training innovation teams and helping them select the ideas and move them into implementation. So I've seen organization after organization creating this formidable infrastructure to support middle managers, because middle managers are not the ones who are going to train their people in innovation, but they can have an army of coaches, certified coaches in innovation, who they can rely on as a resource to help their team innovate. So I think this is where I see middle managers play a very central role. Give them a resource they can use, because they don't have the time and the resources to train their people. So you need to give them a central resource, an army of coaches that they can rely on, create incentives for them. I mean, Allianz UK, for instance, we're talking about Allianz, they have an innovation league table that they publish on a regular basis, where they publish the performance of all their UK divisions in terms of how innovative they are. So naturally, every middle manager doesn't want to be at the bottom of that league table.
Right.
So this is what I call, I have kind of developed a small motto for middle managers particularly, and I say, give permission to innovate and make others jealous. You may remember the motto that we typically have for frontline people. Don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness.
Right, of course.
But on the other hand, if you give permission to people to innovate, they don't have to be asking for forgiveness for anything. So this is the way where middle managers can actually be incentivized. I would say the incentives should be on the middle managers to create an atmosphere for their teams to innovate, rather than put the pressure on the individual innovators, if you will.
When I ran organizations, I used to have a document that everybody who came up with an idea that we implemented, it would say what the idea was and who suggested it. And then when people joined the organization, they got this sheet that was many pages long. Secretary came up with this, the janitor came up with this.
Absolutely.
And then everybody felt like, oh, well, I can throw any idea out there. And we tell them there's no bad idea. And if we use it, then we would also bonus them based on what the outcome was.
Absolutely. This is brilliant. I mean, what I found out is that for people to innovate, they need three things. First, they need to feel that they are able to do it. They are allowed. This is what I call give them permission to innovate. I mean, this has to be given in, how would I say, sincerely. I mean, you know, people very often realize that if you don't give people permission to innovate, I mean, they're not going to think about it. They won't do it. The second thing that is essential is that people need to feel capable. So which means that they need to be given the tools, the time, the resources, the training to do it. And thirdly, like you're saying, Mark, they need to feel motivated. They need to feel that they have some autonomy, that that management wants the ideas. If they don't, I mean, I've seen in many organizations, people have lots of ideas, but they don't think that the ideas are wanted. And even sometimes they feel afraid of expressing their ideas. So they need to feel that we want their ideas, that they are going to be acknowledged, recognized, and even, you know, rewarded for that. It doesn't have to be necessarily monetary reward, but just a acknowledgement from a middle manager. You know, a note that says that, you know, I'm proud of you. This was a great idea. I think it can go a long way. Maybe this is a good time for me to tell you about a story that happened to me. I was talking about Japan, but this is somebody I trained. I think it was 2001, 2002. This is a Japanese manager, and I visited him many times after, and I discovered what he was doing to, at his level as a middle manager, change the culture of his team. So he had made a very interesting observation. He had realized that when his staff were executing their job, you know, I make a distinction between execution and innovation. Huh? So when people are executing, they're usually executing a very structured tasks, where there's a procedure, they even can, you know, be measured. This is very observable. So when people execute their tasks, they know that their boss can understand if they're doing well or not, how well they're performing, because it's observable. But when they are in innovating mode, you cannot observe. I mean, I cannot look at you, Mark, and say, oh, I think you have an idea. You're hiding it from me. There's no way for me to know. So what he understood is that when people came to him with an idea, they were taking a risk, because they could just stay silent if they wanted to play safe. They could be silent and the boss would never know that they had this brilliant idea. So when they were coming to see him, they were taking a risk. So what he was doing is that each time somebody came to see him, he would always say systematically, thank you, because he understood that people were taking risks. So an idea was a gift to him. And he noticed by just simply systematically saying thank you each time somebody expressed an idea or suggested something in a meeting, he would systematically you know, encourage the person, say thank you. And then he started to see a flood of ideas coming to him. People were understood that he wanted their ideas and that he was thankful for them.
I think it's so important to be authentic in that you're sincere about wanting them. But I felt it was really important to show everybody that we actually implemented it and told and complimented the person in front of the entire group. I mean, I one time had a janitor that I was the chief operating officer, and the CEO said, "Are you a moron? Why would you listen to the janitor?" And so he went on vacation, and I implemented the janitor's idea, and it made us $150,000.
Absolutely. I mean, again, there are two ways to think about this. I mean, I mean, one is that indeed a janitor or a receptionist can have a brilliant idea for the business, but I'm more thinking about I'm also thinking about everybody in the company has a customer, an internal customer or an external customer. So anybody can innovate for their own direct customer.
Right.
So the janitor can innovate in his or her job the same way that the receptionist can innovate in his or her job. And by inviting them to innovate, by giving them the tools and the resources to innovate, they are strengthening their muscle. And by doing this with everybody, you are building up the innovating capability of the organization. And out of this mass of ideas that come on a regular basis, you might have a brilliant idea that wins a lot of revenues for the company. But for me, it's more a question of building the muscle of the whole organization by leveraging the capabilities of everyone. Number one, we know that everyone has creative capabilities. Most of the time, people, they come to work, they don't think that their innovative creativity is desired, so they switch it off. They simply switch it off. But they go home, they go to their community, and suddenly they do all sorts of creative stuff. So why don't we leverage this capability that exists in everybody? And as I said again, Mark, everybody has a customer. So if they can think of a new idea that creates value for that customer and for the company, however small that idea is, I mean, it's all good, isn't it?
Without question, you should be using all your assets, everybody's experiences, and diversity. So what stops great companies from innovating? My theory is when number crunchers, the finance guys get involved and take over non-financial service type businesses, that it's basically over. I mean, there's no interest in making long-term investments. What's your thoughts on that? What did you see?
Yeah, I think, it's the same, in the same line. And my thinking is really this notion that many people think that innovation will come from senior leaders or from R&D or new product development. Is as if like there are some people within the company whose job and specialty is to innovate, and then everybody else, they're there simply to execute. So I very often, when I train people, when I work with companies, I ask the question, and many people they don't think that they're creative, even though they are very, very creative indeed, but they don't think it's their job. And I think this is really this notion that many, I'm talking about established companies. I mean, startups is a different story, but many established companies have been built and developed into formidable execution machines, if you will. And people think that 99%, if not 100% of their job is to execute. So I think the innovative companies that I researched and I featured in the book are companies that have been able to create, systematically create a protected, fully legitimized, fully organized space where, again, anybody can innovate. You can innovate, they can innovate in everything the company does, and where everybody is involved in some innovating activity on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be, we know about the companies that give 15% of time, double time at Gore or 3M, but this could happen for everyone. Everyone in the company should be involved in some form of innovating activity, but that space should be protected, fully legitimized and organized. And this is what I call the innovating engine, if you will, the innovation engine.
Well, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
You talk about the execution and the innovation engines. How do they complement each other? And how does somebody implement that?
I think we've heard of the concept over many years. It's called ambidextrous organization. People talk about execution, exploration. I call it execution versus innovating. So, if you will, change is clearly for many organizations a constant. This is not an exception. So, these organizations and their leaders, their managers, they have to excel at two set of activities, somewhat kind of contradictory, but essential. On the one hand, they have to execute today's strategy. They have to develop, design, deliver the products and services that customers are expecting. And this is the responsibility of what I call the execution. This is the job of execution, and managers around the world spend their lifetime trying to excel at that. But at the same time, these organizations and managers, they have to imagine the strategy, tomorrow's strategy, and the organization of tomorrow, and help make it happen. They have to rethink and reimagine the products and services for customers. They need to reimagine what they're doing today. They need to invent new products that nobody has thought about. And this is what I call innovating. This is the job of the innovating engine. And what is really important here is that any organization has to operate with the two engines. And here I'm being very precise by saying that everyone in the organization has to be operating in both engines. Maybe for many people, it's maybe 90%, 95% of their time in execution, but they should be getting involved on a regular basis. And this is the role, by the way, of middle managers, to actually overlook this innovating engine, making sure that on a regular basis, everybody gets a chance to be involved in some form innovating capability as a way to build the innovating muscle of everyone in the organization. So this is how these two engines exist. So there's the execution engine for today's strategy, the innovating engine that prepares the innovation of the future. And you can see how the innovating engine feeds new ideas and new products for the execution engine to implement. And this is kind of this cycle between this interaction between the two, where again, I insist, everybody is involved. It's not like saying we outsource innovation to R&D or to new product development or to some genius. Everybody is involved in it. Because as I said before, you can be innovating in every aspect of your business.
So you talk about this, you said, why is it important to shift from the supplier side view of customer view when building your innovation engine?
Okay, yeah, so this is interesting. When people are in execution, if you pay attention, very often people are in some what I call a problem-solving mode. Right? Execution is very often about putting a team of typically specialists, and the specialists are brought together to try to solve a problem, whether it is designing, delivering, or marketing, or selling a product to a customer. But it is very often what I call a problem-solving task, which is a very convergent cognitive process, if you will. So it's about finding the optimal solution. So you bring the best people to do that. But when you're innovating, this is not about problem solving. This is what I call about problem finding. It's about finding new problems to solve for the customer, new pain points, new desires, new dreams to solve for the new customers, for the customers, and I would also pay attention to non-customers. So this is a completely divergent process. So this is the distinction I make. When you are in innovating mode, the focus is the customer. It is fundamentally about trying to understand the life of the customer, trying to understand their jobs to be done. What is it that they're trying to accomplish, and find out about the dislikes, the likes, the wishes, the desires. So this is why it's important to do the muscle training, if you will. The muscle training is about how everyone has this capability of switching. Of course, in the beginning, it has to be prompted, it has to be triggered by tools and techniques, but once the muscle is built, people should be able to pivot, to switch from supply side to customer side on very short notice, just by changing their mindset, if you will. And this is something, again, it takes time, And I use a sports analogy on purpose. It's something that you need to train yourself. And the more you train, the better you are, the more dexterous, the more agile you are at switching from one to the other. And similarly, like in sports as well, in the beginning, you need tools, you need equipment to train your muscle at the gym. But once you become very good at some movement or some exercise, then you don't need the tool anymore. So similarly here, people in the beginning, they need some specific tool to help them switch to customer side view, if you will. But once they know how to do it, they can do it, without thinking, very often without thinking about it.
Here's a question from the audience. Have you found that there's a formula or certain consistent components for successful innovation?
You see, as I said, talking about my background, I was trained in France as an engineer. I went to Japan to learn about management, spent a lot of time working with Japanese and observing Japanese companies, did my graduate work, my PhD at MIT, working with American companies. And since I've joined INSEAD, I've worked with companies all around the world. And I don't necessarily am a strong believer of a silver bullet of one way of doing things, but it's more a question of, again, when we talk about innovation, I think everybody has a contribution to make. As I was saying, senior leaders have a role to play, middle managers have a role to play, frontline people are very often where the ideas come from, because they are the ones confronting customers and non-customers. So I don't think there's any consistent one kind of silver bullet or one formula, but at least what I try to explain in the book is that you need to kind of create a formal space for innovation to happen. That's what I found was in common with all of these organizations, and they had different ways of creating this. I mean, I can give the example of the way Bayer created a governance structure for that, but they all have these things in common. First, they created a space and a formal organization for it. They created a governance structure for it. They created processes for innovating. So I refer to them as the creating process, the integration process, and the reframing process. And more importantly, is that everybody was involved. It was not, and in some cases, it was a top-down initiative, where it started from leaders who wanted to create an innovation initiative, and they built from top-down an infrastructure that pushed, the new approach, the new kind of behavior down the organization. I found other organizations where it was mostly initiatives that came from the front line, and then middle managers trying to give them space, and it kind of escalated to the top. So there's many different ways to get there, and I think. As you noticed, Mark, I refer to organizations that operate in all sorts of industries. So, and it's not the usual suspects. I'm not talking about, the big tech, the high tech companies or the entertainment companies. I have examples of companies that operate in the cement business, in the tire business, in the chemical business. These are not necessarily industries that are known for innovation. So the formula that will work in one industry might not work in another, but I told you the pattern. The pattern was really about, it may sound strange what I'm going to say, but what I found these companies doing very well is that they took innovating. I can explain what's the difference between innovation and innovating, but they took innovating seriously. And when sometimes CEOs ask me, what can I do to help build a culture of innovation? I say, just take it seriously. If you take it seriously, things will follow.
Another question from the audience. In your experience, what causes the death of an innovative culture?
Oh, is fear. I would say is fear. Once the front line is afraid of of expressing their ideas, then the worst you can do. I think again, I'm not talking about startups or a genius leader starting a completely disruptive idea. That's a different issue. I mean, then the issue is not innovation, is execution and implementation that you were talking about, Mark. You know, so this is a very different set of problems. But if you want to build a culture of innovation, I think if you don't trust the people anymore, if they don't feel safe expressing the ideas, bringing the ideas, and feeling that this is something that is wanted, that they have a safe, they have a way to channel their ideas. I mean, again, there are some very specific ways to do that. Maybe this is again, I don't want to jump the gun, but I mean, I can give you the example of I mean, yeah, I mean, let me take this one.
Yeah, no, please.
This company is a German company. People might know. It's called Bayer. It's
yeah, of course.
Pharmacology and life sciences company. So this is a company, of course, as you say, most people know. It's a company that has a long history of R&D and scientific achievements. Okay. And it still has a formidable R&D powerhouse there. But what was interesting is that in 2014, they decided to proactively build what I refer to as an innovating engine to leverage the capabilities of the 100,000 employees working in the company. So what did they do? First, they made the whole board was responsible for innovation. Then they created a cross-divisional innovation committee of senior executives. Then they selected 80 senior managers from across all country groups and global functions. And these 80 managers were called innovation ambassadors, and they were supporting the board on innovation. And what did these ambassadors do? They spent most of their time with middle managers. Remember, we're talking about middle managers. They spend time explaining, advocating, sponsoring innovation, training the middle managers. And as I said earlier, they did something really interesting. They created this formidable infrastructure for them. They trained and certified 1,000 innovation coaches who were then kind of activated across the world. So this is for the middle managers. And then for the front line, they created a digital platform called We Solve. So this is a digital platform where any employee within the company who is struggling with dealing with a problem with a customer or internal process or whatever, can post the problem on the platform, and anybody in the company can propose an idea or a solution for that problem. So this is open to everybody, independent of your training, of your function, or your hierarchical role. You can propose a solution. Now, at any one time, they have more than 200 challenges posted on the platform. And they were showing to me the statistics. They have 40,000 people. Since its creation of WeSolve, 40,000 people participated in the platform. But Mark, the most amazing statistics they showed me was that they told me that two-thirds of the best solutions for the problems that were posted, two-thirds of the solutions came from a department or functional unit different from the one where the idea was posted. I think this is fantastic. It shows you that they were able to systematically create this. I mean, it's a governance structure, an infrastructure where everybody gets involved. So this is the kind of engine that I'm talking about, if you will. This is very structured, with people with clear tasks and responsibilities, reporting lines, new functions like, the coaches. I usually refer this to the I coaching. So I saw the same pattern at Samsung. I saw the same pattern at BASF, same pattern at Allianz, where these organizations created a central unit where they would bring some of the brightest people to be trained in the newest techniques in innovation, and then they would participate in training and coaching people in all the businesses. And what was really interesting to me, Mark, is that I've seen some of these companies, once the how would I say, the new thinking, the new tools were absorbed by the organization, they would actually disband that unit because it became part of the culture. In fact, like in the case of BASF now, some of the techniques that these trained coaches were teaching to people are part of the initiation process for any new employee. Any new employee gets into a development training process, and innovation is included in it.
So they've institutionalized this as part
Absolutely.
of.
That's exactly the word. They completely institutionalized it, and they don't need this special organization that was used in some cases for 10, 15 years to jumpstart the engine. But once the engine is started, you just need to make sure that you maintain it and that you keep going. I said earlier that I'm not dogmatic about techniques. Some people like blue ocean strategy, some others like design thinking, some others use lean startup. I'm not dogmatic. As a matter of fact, I believe that organizations should on a regular basis expose people to new techniques, because there's a diminishing return in innovation. Once you use the same approach, you more and more likely not to find new ideas, because it becomes second nature to you. So you need to kind of refresh with new techniques. Yeah.
So we have another question from the audience. How small businesses can innovate when there's no middle management? How important is the middle management for innovation? And you don't have a middle management.
I would say that small businesses, or for that matter, at least the way I would understand it, or startups, the advantage they have is that because they're small, everybody is getting involved with customers. The problem really why we need middle manager and to revive and to stimulate middle manager is really when you have large organizations where middle manager is completely disconnected from the customer. But I would say that in small businesses, I think everybody is very close to the customer. So I don't think having middle managers not kind of understanding or promoting innovation is not an issue anymore, because everybody is exposed to customers and non-customers.
So another question from the audience: can you please expand on innovating versus innovation?
Okay.
Can you talk about that in the book?
Yes, I talk about it, and this again came from my experience. I mean, it's almost 20 years teaching and training and consulting with companies. And one thing I had noticed quite early on is that whenever people were sent to, let's call it an innovation training program, I noticed that even the word innovation, and here again, I refer to it as a noun, the noun innovation tends to be very intimidating. And people coming to an innovation training program, they have this funny expectation that this feeling that when they go back after the training, their boss is going to expect them to come up with a new product or a brilliant idea that is going to disrupt the industry. And I thought that in itself, this expectation or this creates a lot of anxiety and fear. But then again, of course, it started completely accidentally. I started to refer not to innovation, but tell people we were here to learn how to innovate. And this is really about innovating and becoming more innovative. So I was not using the word as a noun, but I was using the verb. And I noticed that people understood that when you talk about innovating or how to innovate, this is more about the process. This is about activities. This is about actions and behaviors that can be incentivized or activities that people can learn how to do, or actions that can be supported by tools. And I can tell you, Mark, immediately I saw this fear dissipate. So I picked on that and I started to actually make it the opening of any training I do, and tell people, listen, this is not about innovation, because of course, innovation, people equate it to a product, to a process, to basically to an outcome, to a result. But I say, we're here to learn how to innovate. This is about the process. This is about the capability, if you will. So for me, I make a distinction. Another metaphor that can sometimes resonate for people is to say that innovation is the tip of the iceberg, is the result, if you will. This is what is visible, is the product that you launch into the market. And when we talk about innovating, in particular, innovating capabilities, it is what is under the water level of the iceberg, this big mass, this collective capability. You know, Linda Hill at Harvard called it collective genius. It is about the collective genius, how you can leverage the capability and the processes that build this, generate these ideas, and out of those ideas, maybe you will have an innovation. So I noticed that this distinction, again, I'm not expecting people to change the language. I mean, I know people will talk about innovation when they are in fact thinking about the process, but at least I alert people to be conscious and to be mindful about which word they're using and for what purpose. And the book, if you will, is not about finding an innovation, is about building the capability of the organization, building the culture, this collective culture, if you will, collective capability of the company. And you see that as soon as you put the onus on the capability, then the KPI is different. It's about behavior, it's about attitude, it's about generating a lot of ideas. Some may pan out, some may not pan out, but the important is to be always creating and generating ideas and building what I call the muscle, if you will. Yeah.
So this touches on the next question, which can you suggest actionable metrics, KPIs, that a team can utilize to demonstrate a successful culture of innovation? There's lots of innovation theater going on where companies say they want to be innovative, but when you dive into the details, it's often business as usual. And I totally agree with that statement.
Absolutely, absolutely, I agree with that. So I think one, of course, it's a shortcut is to measure the outcome. You know, how many ideas are being implemented. But I think we already know that if you try to measure the outcome, people will try to behave in a certain way to just kind of show outcome. I think I'm more interested in behavioral control, is to look at the behavior of people. I think what would be more important is how many times a year people would have been involved in some innovating activity. It can be as simple as being part of a cross-disciplinary team on a project launched by another division, but to be participating as a representative of one's division or function. It can be how much time, how many times have you spent with a customer, a real customer, not in execution mode, but in innovating mode, listening, and I can come back to it later, listening to the voice of the customer, but also maybe listening to what I call the silence of the customer, or learning from non-customers and reporting back to the organization. So I think it's more about getting involved, in activities. You know, if I were to use a sports analogy, there's one thing which is about qualifying for the Olympics. And this would be the outcome, if you will. This is the innovation. When you have a project that succeeds and generates a lot of revenues for the organization. And then there's the other one, which is how many times did you go to training? How many reps have you done in your training? How many times you've gone to innovation training, and how many ideas have you proposed? I mean, just counting the number of ideas and you know, how would say, acknowledging and even rewarding people for submitting ideas or being a positive contributor to innovation, I think is the way you can measure culture. I mean, you don't measure culture the same way that you would measure, if you will, you know, outcome, if you will. So this is more about behavior. This is more about attitude. It is more about language, also what kind of language you use, and how agile you are at switching between supply side and customer side view.
So Ben, I've got a question for you regarding the pandemic. How's innovation changed because of the pandemic? And also, we're seeing a lot of people do not want to come back and work at the office. They've gotten used to working at home, and they prefer it, especially in the 21 to 35-year-olds. You constantly hear people saying at the top that it's hard to get these people to come back to work. So how's that going to change innovation, and how did the pandemic impact innovation? What are we looking at in the future?
Yeah, I mean, one way is clear is that the pandemic, just like other forces out there, have created a lot of stress for companies and created even more so an urgency to innovate and the need to innovate. So in a sense, the necessity to innovate might have increased with the pandemic rather than decreased. Maybe comparatively more increased, but. I think that, again, there will certainly be new alternatives to, maybe before I explain what I'm thinking, I can reemphasize the notion that innovation is about the customer, right? Is about typically I separate this in three things. One is listening to the voice of the customer. You know, and there it requires a special skill. It requires to learn how to listen with empathy, switch from what usually people in companies in execution mode, they use a tell mode or even a sell mode. And when you try to listen to the voice of the customer, you have to switch into a listen mode, and learning how to listen with empathy is very difficult. There are tools and techniques to learn how to do this, but this is a skill. The second thing that is important vis-a-vis the customer is to listen to the silence of the customer. What I mean by the silence is what the customer doesn't tell you, either because they don't know themselves, or because they might know, but they don't think it is your job to solve the problem. And I can give an example if people are interested later. And the third challenge vis-a-vis the customer is to learn from non-customers. And in all these three areas, silence of the customer, voice of the customer, non-customers, I like to say that you cannot outsource your ears. You cannot outsource your eyes. So this is why I believe that if you want to understand the life of the customer, what the job is to be done, it is not easy to do it remotely. There's so much you can do with questions, even open-ended questions. At some point, you need to observe your customer in their natural environment. You have to be the customer. You have to. So I think at some point, staying remotely, working remotely, might be a bit of a challenge for some people in terms of again, listening to the customer and learning from the customer. I can see how, big data, and there may be new techniques that can help us listen to the silence of patterns across what the customer does. But for me, to understand deeply your customer, you need to be with them. Ultimately.
I think you need to be able to be in a room and having a cup of coffee and bouncing ideas.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All hours.
Yes, and observe the customer. I mean, there are all sorts of techniques. This is where design thinking is very useful. Ethnography is very useful. There are all sorts of techniques, but you cannot get to intimately know, especially the silence of the customer, things they don't even know themselves, if you're not able to observe them, or to be with them. And again, there are many examples of techniques that are useful for that. But and again, you need diversity. You need people to come into a room and bounce ideas. And I think that with all the capabilities that Zoom can bring and all that, there's certain social cues that don't get transmitted. There's certain
no question.
Things that will,
I mean, you guys get together, you go to a bar and you hang out and you're swapping ideas and thoughts, or you're in the cafeteria or the coffee room. Let me ask you this.
Actually, just to kind of close on this one, I can see again, now that you asked the question, I can see that execution engine can work remotely, because very often the task is structured. We know what is the objective function. We what training people have and all that. Because they are specialists, but innovation, it's all about recombination and having people with different thinking and all that, and the sheer time that the team has to get to know each other. You cannot do it remotely. You have to, Okay, I think we.
So there are, and you use a lot of other people's ideas because you appreciate them and think there's value to them. So the Lean Startup, it's over 11 years old, Blue Ocean Strategy, are those still useful today? And have you used them yourselves, or do you see your clients and the companies you interact with still using those ideas?
Absolutely. I think you in the 7-step process methodology that I put together, there are elements of Blue Ocean Strategy, of course. There are elements of design thinking, Lean Startup, six thinking hats, so De Bono, systematic innovation. There are lots of different techniques that are embedded in it, because in some ways these techniques they uncover certain how would I say, certain concepts that are still valid. It is about kind of shifting the mindset, and the tools are there to help structure people's thinking and channel it in one direction where they would not usually go without the techniques and the tools. So having said that, I'm not necessarily a proponent of having one tool for innovation for every problem. I think that having within the organization people who are trained in different tools put together, I think can enrich. As I mentioned in the book, I see quite a number of organizations, like people at AkzoNobel, where I trained people in Blue Ocean Strategy and some of these techniques for many years. But now they have a special unit where they actually scout out all the innovation techniques that are put on the market, and they try to appropriate what fits better for them and propose those techniques to the organization. And of course, different divisions will react to different techniques differently. I think it is more about organizations to be abreast of what new methods exist out there, learning about them, testing them, and bringing them back into the organization, because different units will respond differently to different techniques. And as long as the techniques help switch people's mind. I think this is really what all of these techniques have in mind, is to get people to think out of whatever box they are in at the time. And I'm sure there'll be new techniques, and the old techniques still work very well, I think. Yes.
Ben, I got to say, it was a quick hour. I loved your book.
Oh, we're
I'm
already
sorry,
there?
I could have spent a couple hours with you at least going over some of these case studies that you have, but I hope everybody will, who is really passionate about innovation, will buy your book and share it with others. So I thank you so much for taking the time to speak
Thank
with
you.
us, especially you're right now in France or Japan?
No, I'm in France, and I'm leaving for Japan in a couple of days. Yes.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see
Thank
you
you so
all
much.
next week.
Thank you. Thank you for
Have a
having
great
me.
day.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you so much. Enjoyed it. It was fun.